They thought they could bully me with letters and legal-sounding nonsense. But what the neighborhood board didn't realize was that I wasn't just another homeowner. I happened to be the chief of police for the entire county. And when they decided to cross the line, they were about to discover that the law doesn't bow to petty power trips. Before we get too deep into this, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'm curious how far this story will travel. It all started when Carla, the president of our local homeowners association, decided to play queen of the cul-de-sac. Clipboard in hand, she strutted from house to house like she was running a federal agency. Her latest crusade? Targeting my property. She claimed that because my pickup truck was parked on my own driveway, I was violating a neighborhood ordinance. Never mind that the vehicle was fully registered, inspected, and legally parked. State Transportation Statute 21803.5 makes it crystal clear that no HOA can override municipal parking regulations. When I refused to pay the fine she mailed me, Carla doubled down. A few days later, she showed up on my doorstep flanked by two men in matching polo shirts. They introduced themselves as community compliance officers, which already sounded ridiculous, and flashed flimsy badges that looked like they'd been printed on a home laminator. "Sir," one of them warned, trying his best to sound authoritative, "if you don't comply with our community code, we'll have no choice but to place you under arrest." That word, arrest, was the first red flag. HOAs don't have arrest powers. Only sworn peace officers do under State Penal Statute 832.2. I kept a straight face and let them finish their little performance while the body camera clipped under my shirt quietly, recorded every second. I even pretended to be confused, asking them to repeat their statements, clarify their authority, and explain exactly what they meant. Every lie they told, every false threat they uttered, became one more piece of evidence in a growing pile. A pile I knew I'd soon be using against them, but on the inside I was already several steps ahead. If Carla wanted to play pretend cop with her little committee, I was more than prepared to show her what real authority looked like. Things spiraled quickly after that. Less than 24 hours later, a so-called security unit, a white SUV with flashing amber lights, rolled right into my driveway like they had a warrant. And who climbed out? The same two impostors from the day before, only now they'd upgraded their act. Each of them carried heavy-duty zip ties in hand, gripping them like handcuffs. They still had no clue who they were up against. The pair strutted up my driveway with puffed-up confidence, like they were about to execute an official arrest. One of them barked, "Sir, by the authority of our Community Enforcement Division, you're being detained. Stand aside, or we'll be forced to use physical restraint." I almost laughed in his face. Community Enforcement Division? There's no such thing. And under Title 18, U.S. Code Section 913, impersonating a peace officer isn't a minor infraction. It's a federal offense. They weren't just bluffing anymore. They were committing a felony right there on my property. I raised my hands slowly, pretending to comply. All right, I said, stepping down from the porch with exaggerated caution. But the moment they reached for me, instinct and years of training took over. I moved fast, faster than either of them expected. I caught the first man's wrist mid-reach, twisted sharply, and drove him down to the ground in one fluid motion. The takedown was over before he even realized he was in trouble. Then came the sound and a harsh, wet pop as his knee folded in a direction knees aren't meant to go. The first man let out a blood-curdling scream, clutching his twisted leg as he tried to crawl backward toward their ridiculous patrol SUV. But before he got far, his partner charged at me with the zip ties raised, as if that flimsy plastic somehow gave him authority. I shifted my stance and swept my leg low, my boot hooked around his ankle, yanking it out from under him. He hit the pavement hard, face first, with a dull thud. A sickening crack followed. His knee had slammed into the ground at the wrong angle, and it gave way instantly. Now he was the one screaming. He clawed at the driveway, trying to get up. But the moment he put weight on his leg, it buckled beneath him like wet cardboard. Within seconds, both of them were on the ground, crawling and moaning, the zip ties forgotten. "Please," one gasped. "Don't hurt us again." I didn't need to. They were already finished. Slowly, I reached into my jacket and pulled out my real badge, the one with the county seal, issued by the sheriff's office, not printed on a home laminator. I crouched beside them, my voice steady and cold. "Here's what's happening," I said. "You just impersonated law enforcement, trespassed on private property, and attempted an unlawful detention. That's 3 felonies, and each one can put you behind bars." Their faces drained of color. All the fake confidence and tough guy posturing evaporated. Now they were just 2 terrified men on the ground, staring up at someone they deeply underestimated. I tapped my radio and called it in. Within minutes, a pair of marked patrol units roared onto the street, sirens echoing through the neighborhood. Officers poured out with weapons drawn, quickly disarming and cuffing the 2 impostors. They were read their rights, loaded into the back of a real squad car, and driven away. No fake authority, no zip ties, no bluff left to hide behind. Curtains twitched up and down the block as neighbors peeked from behind their blinds, whispering to each other. This wasn't some petty HOA squabble anymore. This was an active criminal takedown, and everyone watching knew it. But here's the thing. I also knew the 2 clowns on the pavement weren't acting on their own. Someone higher up in that HOA had sent them, and I had a pretty good idea exactly who was pulling the strings. If you're enjoying how this showdown is unfolding, stick around, Fob, because the best part of the story is still to come. At the station, the 2 fake officers folded almost immediately. It didn't even take an hour in the interrogation room before one of them cracked under pressure. He admitted they hadn't come up with this stunt on their own. Someone from the HOA had promised them a generous payout if they could. Teach me a lesson. And that someone? None other than Carla Whitman, the HOA president herself. I wasn't the least bit surprised. Carla had been itching for payback ever since. I cited her son last year for reckless driving through a school zone. This was personal. She thought she could use intimidation tactics to scare me into moving out, maybe even sabotage my career in the process. But all she really did was tie herself to a federal criminal investigation. The list of charges piled up fast. Impersonation of a peace officer under 18 U.S. Code, Parágrafo 93. Conspiracy to commit unlawful detention, criminal trespass, and attempted abduction. Each one carried serious time behind bars. And because Carla was the one pulling the strings, she wasn't hiding behind HOA bylaws anymore. She was now the architect of a felony conspiracy. When my detectives brought her in, Carla tried her usual act, calm, superior, smug. "This is all a misunderstanding," she said, trying to keep her composure. "I was only acting in the community's best interest." I leaned across the table and slid a thick manila folder toward her. Inside were sworn statements from the 2 men she'd hired, photographs of the fake badges, and high-definition footage from my own security cameras, showing them attempting an arrest on my property. Her confidence evaporated in an instant. "This isn't a misunderstanding, Carla," I told her quietly. "It's a criminal conspiracy, and it's over." Her attorneys sputtered and argued, but the case was airtight. Within hours, Carla was fingerprinted, photographed, and booked into county jail. The following afternoon, the HOA board convened an emergency meeting. The same neighbors who had once tiptoed around. Carla's strict rules now stood shoulder to shoulder, demanding her immediate removal. The vote was unanimous. Carla was stripped of her presidency, fined heavily to cover legal costs, and permanently barred from holding any HOA position ever again. As for the 2 impostors, they'll be heading to prison once their shattered knees heal, with plenty of time to wonder why they ever agreed to cross me. That evening, I stood on my front porch, coffee steaming in my hand, watching as patrol cars continued to idle down the street, their red and blue lights painting the neighborhood in rhythmic flashes. Justice had a weight to it, heavy, deliberate, but deeply satisfying. The neighborhood was finally free from Carla's iron-fisted rule. And me, I wasn't just another homeowner. I was the chief of police, and I'd made one thing crystal clear. When you send fake officers to my door, you don't just lose your power. You lose everything,